The ballroom looked like every wedding ballroom I had ever seen: white tablecloths, soft gold lighting, floral centerpieces so symmetrical they felt almost rehearsed. The kind of room designed to make families feel like everything about them was beautiful and orderly. I had paid for most of it. Not because anyone demanded it outright. My sister had simply mentioned how expensive weddings were these days, and my father had joked that someone in the family actually has money. Everyone had laughed, and I had written the check 2 weeks later. It seemed easier that way. For most of my life, I had been the dependable one. The daughter who stayed practical, the one who didn't rush into marriage or children. I built a career, bought a house, saved aggressively. My parents called it being responsible. But sometimes the word carried a different tone. Responsible meant available. It meant birthdays funded quietly, vacations partially covered, and now a wedding that had slowly grown from modest to extravagant without anyone formally asking if that was comfortable for me. I didn't resent my sister. Not really. She looked radiant that night, overwhelmed and happy in the way brides are supposed to look. Every time our eyes met across the room, she smiled at me with genuine gratitude. But gratitude can exist beside something else. The speeches began after dinner. The usual ones. The best man stumbled through stories from college. My sister's friend talked about childhood sleepovers and borrowed clothes. The room laughed easily. Then my father stood. He had always liked an audience. Even when I was a child, family gatherings seemed to turn into small performances once he had a drink in his hand and people looking his way. He lifted the microphone with a relaxed smile, tapping it twice like he owned the room. At a wedding, he began, you're supposed to talk about love and family. Polite laughter. He said a few warm things about my sister. About how proud he was, about how quickly time passes. It was almost touching. People leaned in. Then his tone shifted in that familiar way I'd heard my entire life. And of course, he continued, grinning, none of this would have happened without my older daughter. He gestured toward me across the room. A spotlight of attention landed on my table. Now, he said, chuckling into the microphone, she might still be a spinster, but her money is very useful. The room laughed, not the full laugh he expected. Something uneven. Some people clapped politely. A few guests glanced in my direction with quick, uncertain smiles. I heard my sister gasp softly. For a moment I didn't move. It wasn't shock exactly. My father had always joked about my life this way. The single daughter. The practical one. The one who worked too much. But something about hearing it amplified through a microphone, turned into entertainment for a ballroom full of strangers, shifted the weight of it. I looked at the guests. At the decorations. At the stage where my father stood smiling like he had delivered the perfect line. And I realized something simple. The role I played in this family had always required silence. I stood. The chair legs made a small scraping sound that seemed louder than it should have been. Conversations slowed. My father noticed me standing and lifted his eyebrows playfully like he expected me to wave. Instead I walked toward the microphone. The wedding planner near the stage looked uncertain but stepped aside. I didn't take the microphone from my father immediately. I just stood there until he handed it to me, still smiling, assuming the moment was part of the show. I faced the room. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Dad's right about one thing, I said. I did help make tonight possible. A few guests nodded politely. I looked toward my sister. She looked pale. The gift I promised you both? I continued. The $100,000 for your future. The room went very still. That gift is canceled. No shouting followed, just silence. It spread slowly across the ballroom like a ripple. My father laughed, a little too loudly. Oh, come on, he said into the microphone beside me. She's joking. I didn't respond. I placed the microphone back into the stand. That was when the wedding planner approached the head table. She spoke quietly but clearly enough that the people nearby could hear. There are a few vendor balances tied to that account. she said carefully. We'll need to discuss payment arrangements. The reality of money, actual contracts and deposits, entered the room in a way jokes couldn't erase. My father stopped smiling. Guests looked between us, unsure where to place their attention. I stepped away from the stage and returned to my seat. For the first time all evening, nobody tried to make conversation with me. About 10 minutes passed before my sister came over. She knelt beside my chair, her wedding dress spreading across the carpet. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Her voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry, just shocked. "I didn't know he was going to say that." "I know," I said. She looked like she wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. I didn't lecture her. There wasn't much point. The problem wasn't just one joke. It was years of small moments where my life became family entertainment while my support remained quietly expected. Eventually the music started again. The wedding continued, though the room felt different. People spoke more softly. My father stayed seated at his table, drinking without making eye contact with anyone. I left before the dancing really began. Outside, the night air felt cooler than I expected. For a moment, I just stood in the parking lot, listening to the muffled music coming through the ballroom walls. I wasn't celebrating. Nothing about the situation felt victorious. My relationship with my father had probably changed permanently. My sister's wedding night would always contain this memory. But there was something else, too. For the first time in years, I felt the strange absence of a role I had been playing. The dependable daughter. The quiet wallet. The woman who tolerated jokes because keeping the peace seemed easier. That role had ended in a ballroom full of witnesses. What replaced it wasn't clear yet. But for the first time, it would be my choice.